Cornerstone presents Into the Deep, What is Truth? In chapter 18 of the Gospel of John, we see Jesus standing before Pilate, who is trying to find a reason to condemn Jesus to death to appease the Jewish authorities. So Pilate asked him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. I was born and came into this world for this one purpose, to speak about the truth. Whoever belongs to the truth listens to me." "And what is truth?" Pilate asked. "What is truth? There are different kinds of truth in the world. Subjective truth is based on a person's perspectives, feelings, or opinions. Objective truth is independent from individual subjectivity. Absolute truth is an inflexible reality, fixed, invariable, unalterable facts. When Jesus said that he came to speak about truth, he wasn't speaking of subjective truth. What is true for me isn't true for you. He was speaking about objective, absolute truth. He lets us know that when he says, "Whoever belongs to the truth listens to me." Are you ready to go into the deep? What is truth? Jesus' teachings, the way he lived his life, and the way he calls us to live can be summed up in the Sermon on the Mount. The teachings in the Sermon on the Mount were countercultural then and remain countercultural now. The Beatitudes show us what true happiness is. Christ calls us to be salt and light for the world. Christ reminds us that he is not doing away with the 10 Commandments, rather he is coming to fulfill them. Jesus wants us to make peace and restitution with others as soon as possible. He reminds us that if our eye causes us to sin, we should cut it out because it would be much better than going to hell for eternity. He teaches us about the connection between divorce and adultery. Jesus doesn't want us to make vows when we make a promise. He wants us to offer our other cheek when we are slapped on one, love our enemies, and pray for those who persecute us. When we do all of these things well, we belong to the truth. The late Pope Benedict XVI, when he was Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, said that relativism is the greatest problem of our time. When you reflect on how he lived during our own time, that's a pretty big statement when there are so many problems we are facing right now. Relativism is the idea that there is no universal or absolute truth, but that truth differs from person to person and culture to culture. There are moral and religious relativists who say that only what can be scientifically verified should be regarded as objectively true. You may hear them saying things like, "You have your truth and I have mine," or "You can't impose your morality on someone else." In the book, Absolute Relativism, The New Dictatorship and What to Do About It, which I will be referencing throughout this video, the author, Chris Stefanik, states, "Belief in moral and religious truth leads to real tolerance, while relativism, contrary to popular belief, leaves us with false tolerance at best and intolerance at worst." If you speak with someone who believes in relativism, they might be confused with that quote, since they believe tolerance is not strongly disagreeing with anyone on moral or religious issues, what was previously called disagreement. But if relativists believe they are trying to create a world like John Lennon's song Imagine, to battle the injustices we see in the world, why are they instead creating the greatest problem of our time? If we look back on the Sermon on the Mount and Jesus' conversation with Pilate, we will see that the teachings of Jesus are true, absolute, objective truth. These truths do not differ from person to person and culture to culture. They are the truth. The 10 Commandments safeguard the dignity of each person, the dignity that was given to them by God at the moment of their conception. Yes, Jesus accepted people where they were, but he also challenged them to change their lives. When we say this is true for me and might not be true for you, when speaking of the way Christ wants us to live, we are denying the fact that the natural moral law has God as its author, and that man participates in the eternal law and does not establish it. In Gaudium et Spes, Pope Paul VI states, "But if the expression, the independence of temporal affairs, is taken to mean that created things do not depend on God, and that man can use them without any reference to their Creator, anyone who acknowledges God will see how false such a meaning is. For without the Creator, the creature would disappear." For their part, however, all believers of whatever religion always hear his revealing voice in the discourse of creatures. When God is forgotten, however, the creature itself grows unintelligible. It's easy to see this playing out in relativism, since it in and of itself is contradictory. For example, when they say, "All truth is relative," do they mean that as a relative truth? When they say there are no absolutes, Are they absolutely sure? And when they say, "It's true for you, but not for me," is that statement true for just them, or is it true for everyone? In The Splendor of Truth, St. John Paul II writes, "The supreme good and the moral good meet in truth, the truth of God, the Creator and Redeemer, and the truth of man, created and redeemed by Him. Only upon this truth is it possible to construct a renewed society and to solve the complex and weighty problems affecting it. Above all, the problem of overcoming the various forms of totalitarianism, so as to make way for the authentic freedom of the person." In the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verses 31 to 36, we read, "So Jesus said to those who believed in him, 'If you obey my teaching, you are really my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.' 'We are the descendants of Abraham,' they answered, 'and we have never been anybody's slaves. What do you mean, then, by saying, you will be free?' Jesus said to them, 'I am telling you the truth. Everyone who sins is a slave of sin. A slave does not belong to a family permanently, but a son belongs there forever. If the Son sets you free, then you will really be free.' God's law does not reduce, much less do away with human freedom. Rather, it protects and promotes that freedom. Truth is not a creation of freedom. There is a fundamental dependence of freedom upon truth." St. Paul warns us in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, "Do not conform yourselves to the standards of this world, but let God transform you inwardly by a complete change of your mind. Then you will be able to know the will of God, what is good and is pleasing to Him and is perfect." Our conscience is not always perfect, which again is why Cardinal Ratzinger said that relativism is the greatest problem of our time. Those who believe in objective truth have the humility to seek truth and attempt to conform to it when they find it. St. John Paul II, in Splendor of Truth, states, "The Church's firmness in defending the universal and unchanging moral norms is not demeaning at all. Its only purpose is to serve man's true freedom, because there can be no freedom apart from or in opposition to the truth. The categorical, unyielding, and uncompromising defense of the absolutely essential demands of man's personal dignity must be considered the way and the condition for the very existence of freedom." Always allow your mind to close in on truth, but your heart should never close on people. As Jesus met people where they were and challenged them to change, He did so out of love for the person. At the canonization of Edith Stein, Pope John Paul II said, "Do not accept anything as the truth if it lacks love, and do not accept anything as love which lacks truth. One without the other becomes a destructive lie." If Cardinal Ratzinger said that relativism is the greatest problem of our time, how are we to solve it? I'd like to end this video the way Stefanik ended his book. The solution to the problem of every age is ultimately the same. The same thing will win back the world today that won it over in the first place 2,000 years ago, when a ragtag group of fishermen without any worldly power or means decided to leave everything to follow Jesus. Holiness, that is the silver bullet, period. So when people who are choking on the fumes of relativism come near you, they should get a whiff of the rarefied air of heaven and a glimpse into a world that makes sense. You are needed to become a spiritual furnace in an increasingly cold, dark world. When Pontius Pilate asked Jesus, "What is truth?" he was looking into the face of the one who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." He didn't say, "I am a way, an opinion, and a lifestyle." Don't just talk about him. Show his face to the world today. I wish I could offer an easier solution, as this one requires your whole life, but there is none. Here are the resources used in the making of this video. Splendor of Truth, Pope John Paul II. Absolute Relativism, The New Dictatorship and What to Do About It by Stefanik. Gaudium et Spes, Pope Paul VI, and the Good News translation of the Bible. Cornerstone, Follow, Guide, Lead.